The Netherlands has 15 social impact bonds, and our speaker here today is involved in 10 of those. He's here today to tell us a little bit about the effects of those impact bonds, and we're very eager to listen to you. He's from Social Finance, Netherlands. And say warm welcome to Ruben Koekoek.
Thank you very much. Pronunciation was very well of my last name, Koekoek. Brilliant. Yeah, so we would think we will do a pub quiz in this room, but I will do a presentation about social impact bonds. I hope I don't disappoint you too much. But let's see in the room who. Let's see who's in the room. So, who is a potential investor, or who's in social impact bonds, or who represents an investor? Around 10 people, and who represents like a social entrepreneur, or like someone who a service provider. I think half of the room. And are there also any civil servants in the room? Okay, 30%. Anyone, like someone who can be an evaluator of social impact bonds? Yeah, 2 evaluators. So we can make a deal all together. Like we are, everyone is here, and that's great. So what will we do? Like I will tell some of my experience about social impact bonds. This is for the registration. So I will tell something about the experience we had in the Netherlands. Then I will tell like the main advantages of social impact bonds, but also the bottlenecks we faced. And then I really like to discuss with you like what is needed here in Norway to build up a market of social impact bonds, and how to build an ecosystem. And we're not there yet in the Netherlands, so I'm also really eager to learn from you guys. But Katinka asked me first to tell a bit about my home country. Like, my name is Ruben Koekoek. I'm the co-founder and director of Social Finance NL, part of the social finance family, which is also active in the UK, US, India, and Israel. And before that, for 9 years, I worked for ABN AMRO Bank as a banker. And this is my house. No, and my windmill. No, but it's. I live in Amsterdam, but this is a picture, that famous picture of the Netherlands with the windmills. But if you look very close, you can also see something else, and that's that water is higher than the land, and like for 70% of the Netherlands, that's the case. Like we live below sea level, and we Dutch people believe that's one of the reasons why cooperation is in our DNA, because we fight the water all the time, so we have to cooperate, and maybe that can be a reason why social impact bonds are quite appealing to Dutch people. But I also see other comparisons with Norway. We have a very strong social sector, like you guys do, but we are very open for innovation. And also, if you look at the map, the Netherlands is one of the most western countries of continental Europe. It's quite close to the UK, so I think we have that social model like Scandinavian countries have, but we also really are open for businesses. We are very international, and we believe in the market. So I think that combination, take that into account when discussing social impact bonds, because I think quite some of those issues are also the case here in Norway. So what I said, like I worked for ABN AMRO, then 1.5 years ago we founded Social Finance NL, as in this picture. And when I worked for the bank, I worked for the innovation department of ABN AMRO, and then I read a small newspaper article about social impact bonds, and we tried to set up one ourselves. So we had a small investment fund for impact investors within the bank, and they were enthusiastic. And then together with the municipality of Rotterdam, we created the first social impact bond. So let me first go through that first deal. Then I will tell something about the other deals in the Netherlands and about the bottlenecks we face, and then we will discuss like what's relevant for the Norway example. Okay? So, 2013, Rotterdam, in the middle of the crisis, huge unemployment, 16,000 youngsters in Rotterdam were unemployed. And normally the municipality of Rotterdam gives lots of subsidies for all kinds of organizations who try to solve youth unemployment. So we did it differently. If it works.
It works.
Ah, great. So instead of giving a subsidy to investors, pay the social enterprise. The social enterprise is called the business club. Paid the social enterprise 750,000 euros, and with that money, they were able to work with 160 youngsters who were on benefits to get them into a job, education, or entrepreneurship. And we created a model, and that's very important for every social issue you solve. You need to know what will be the case if you don't solve the issue. So let's say I'm unemployed and I'm going into the program. If I get a job in 2-3 months, it doesn't say anything. You want to know what will happen, what would have happened to me if I didn't join the program, and that's really difficult. And there are some mechanisms for that. For example, randomized control trials are something often used, but we did it on historic data. So we made a model where, based on all the data available at the municipality of Rotterdam, where we can predict how many days someone would be on benefits based on someone's background, like the neighborhood someone lives in, the number of kids, indebted or not, education, previous employment history. So if we all put it in a model, it comes like when I lose my job, it takes me 200 days to get into a new job. And 200 days cost the municipality 40 euros a day. So that's 8,000 euros on benefits cost. So if I go to the program and it takes me 100 days, then it's 100 days less, is a saving of 4,000 euros. Now the program itself costs also 4,000 euros, so then that's a break-even level. And more than 100 days of savings, then in my case, there's a small profit which you can make. So we made that model, and we tracked all the business club members, whether they were on benefits or not. It's very easy because they are in the database of the municipality. And that was reported to the municipality of Rotterdam, and based on that data, Deloitte was the assessor, and based on that data, the investors are paid out or not. So that was a very simple model of our first social impact bond. Is that clear? So we learned a lot, and can tell about a lot of mistakes. But it was a really nice model, and our CEO launched it in Rotterdam, and we got huge media attention, really huge. The national 8 o'clock news is the main news show, broadcasted it, but also all the newspapers wrote about this deal. So then within the bank they say, what's next? Can you duplicate this to other municipalities or maybe other social areas? And we started a very small social impact bond team within ABN AMRO Bank of me and my colleague. So then we skipped some deals, but so within ABN AMRO we created 6 deals, more deals with municipalities, also on youth and employment, but we also work with the Ministry of Justice on the decrease of recidivism. We worked with the municipality of Enschede on reducing unemployment for older people. And we also worked with a absentee insurance company. And what we did with them is also quite interesting. We noticed that employees who are diagnosed with cancer are often for a long period away from work. Longer than you should expect if you look at the physical conditions, and that's because it's really difficult for an employee after you're out of workforce to go back at work where everything changed. Yourself change because you experience a quite impressive disease, but also your company changed. But not only the employee faced that problem, but also the employer needs to know how to deal with people who are diagnosed with cancer. So we funded a training where both employer and employees are guided into that process, and that should lead to less absentee days, which is of course positive for the absentee insurance company. So we also made, that's called Reacher, we also made a deal with them. So we made 6 deals, and again we got quite some good media attention, what people at banks really like, because they are not used to good media attention. But I did really have the feeling that we did a trick. Like we knew how to do a social impact bond and everyone loved it, but do we really make a difference? Does it make an impact which you cannot make if you traditionally finance social change? And the honest answer was no, or yes and no. But to really make a difference, I think you should not focus on social impact bonds, but you should focus on a different way of tackling social issues, and to build a new kind of partnership, which is result driven, which is data driven, and where you act in a different way with each other. But I come back to that very soon. So 1.5 years ago we decided we need to build an ecosystem in the Netherlands. Not just deals, but really an ecosystem of academia, of government, of dedicated investors. And to build an ecosystem, that's not something you can do as a department from a bank. You need to do that as an independent intermediary, and that's why we founded Social Finance NL. So if you look at our deal flow in the Netherlands, you see 15 deals. Some of them I talked about. Like a big one is the Ministry of Defense. So all soldiers who are not able to serve anymore because of physical disabilities or mental disabilities, they will go through a program funded by a social impact bond. So it's a 16 million social impact bond. So that's quite a big one. We have quite some deals with refugees. That's a big new group which needs help to participate in the labor force. And all these 4 deals, so they with refugees, but also with people with who are blind. They're all part of one outcome fund. Is anyone familiar with an outcome fund?
I think it's very rare here in Norway, and we don't have any stuff now. So I think.
Yeah. So an outcome fund is actually very easy. Instead of focusing on one deal, as a government, you can also say, okay, I just dedicate, let's say, 100 million in a fund, and that's in that fund I only pay out for results. So then you create an infrastructure where you can do several social impact bonds. So we don't have a 100 million outcome fund yet, which is the case in the UK, but we made a very small 1 million outcome fund, and then we said to entrepreneurs, please, if you have any ID and if you want to be paid by results, please apply for this outcome fund, and then we funded 3 social entrepreneurs through this outcome fund. So why should you use social impact bonds? Why can it be can it create more impact, more social change? For me, social impact bond is really like it's a tool, not a goal on itself, but it's a disciplinary tool. It's because before you can start a social impact bond, before you can spend money on a social problem, first you have to make sure that you know what you want. You have to make clear what your outcomes are, which you want to achieve, and how you can quantify those outcomes. And secondly, you have to think about how you can measure whether those outcomes are met and that they are attributed towards an intervention you're funding. And I think that's quite needed if I look at Dutch politics and the Dutch government, because often projects are funded where people don't have a clue which outcomes they want to achieve. So it gives insight into the effectiveness of activities. It can create strong public-private partnerships, and what a lot of governments like, it transfers the risk towards investors. And then if you, in the ideal way, but I think in Norway and the Netherlands it's less the case than in the UK and the US, but it can lead to more prevention into the social sector. So when you look at the UK example and the US, there's not enough money in the social sector actually. And I think if I look in the Netherlands, there is kind of enough money, but it's not spent well. So it's more a tool to spend money better than to get more money into the social sector. And it can also lead to more innovation. Normally, if you give a subsidy, then you write what you will do with the subsidy, you get the subsidy, and that you do just that. But if you can make a results contract, then you write which results you want to achieve, you get the money, and you can iterate the program during the process to get to the best results. And especially within innovation, is anyone familiar with, or is anyone a startup? Like, is there a startup in the room? So you know, I'm also a startup, so we know that that when you start something, you often do it wrong, and that's not a problem because you didn't do it before. But it's you do something to find out how you have to do it. But if you apply for a 4-year subsidy and you after year 1 you go back to your grantor and you say, it was really amazing what I did, can I get money for year 2? But you want to shift that discussion and you want to say to your grantor, I really did my best, look at the data, like we didn't get the results right yet, but how can we have a conversation to learn from year 1 and get to the best results for year 2? And that shift into the conversation of a grantor and grantee, or a civil or government and the one who gets the subsidy, that shift into the conversation, I think if you can achieve that, then like social impact bonds really, really work, but it's not easy. So, the main bottlenecks in the Netherlands. First, and then I already mentioned that one, don't create a SIP for the sake of SIPs. Maybe with one example, like if it's not there in the country, do one, get a lot of media attention so you can continue your work and you can further develop the methodology, but really think what you want to achieve. And what you can see it as a gradual change in procurement from like just a subsidy, like old-fashioned subsidy, to a more strategic way of thinking of how to procure social outcomes. And it can be that a social impact bond is a good tool for it, but it can also be that another tool fits better. What I think what is needed for a social impact, like I often advise not to create social impact bonds below a threshold of 1 million euros. You can also say 2 million or 3 million, but we advise not below, because otherwise the costs are often too high compared with the amount you invest. And what we didn't do that well in the Netherlands is we didn't really invest in good performance management. So we were talking about how to create a different dialogue based on the data, how you can improve an iteration, but then you really need good, it's called active performance management. And if you and you have to budget for that. So you can't just make a deal with a lot of energy and then leave the social entrepreneur alone. No, that partnership is, you need to invest in that partnership along the way. Secondly, and there I heard you have 300 municipalities here in Norway. And you have 301 people living here, or? No, so also in the Netherlands we have like 350 municipalities for 17 million people. And the last 5 years we decentralized a lot of tasks from the government. So for example, youth unemployment is a task of the government. Youth care of the local community, the municipality. Youth care as well. And sometimes that's great because local authorities knows what's happening in their jurisdiction. But it can also really be a handicap, especially if you want to create financial or instruments like social impact bonds. Because like every municipality has to invent the wheel on itself. So therefore, please think how you can centrally build up knowledge and expertise on social impact bonds, which you can use locally. An outcome fund would be great. Sorry? Oh.
I have a question when you finish that.
Yeah, so an outcome fund can be great. For example, the Life Chances Fund in the UK, 20% you can apply for a contract with the outcome fund, but they only give 20% of the money which is needed for the outcomes, and 80% comes from local authorities. But besides the 20%, they also give technical expertise in cooperation with Oxford University. So please think about how centrally you can build up knowledge which you can use locally, because decentralization is quite a challenge in the Netherlands, and it will be also in Norway, I believe. And the third one is a lack of transparency. So if we really believe we can create better outcomes, we really have to show what the outcomes are, how the contracts are designed, how do we measure, and that's not just a press release, how brilliant we are. No, it's really give detailed information about what we are exactly doing. First, and that's to the civil servants, because you owe it to your taxpayers, and secondly, because only then we can learn from each other and really create an ecosystem. And for 8 years I worked on the investor side, and I always felt civil servants are really a bit scared by or not scared, but they want to. They didn't deal with investors before, and they also want to facilitate investors to invest in their community and in their projects. But I think on transparency, the civil servants should stand firm. There's no negotiation about that, and the investor has to change his mindset, because they are used to private deals where there's no disclosure. You don't have to disclose anything. But with a public-private deal, I think you need really high levels of transparency, and that's now becoming the case in the UK. But in the Netherlands, we really have a lack of transparency, and that's that's quite a bottleneck. Yes.
Sorry. I think this is great information, and I was just wondering that will you tap into like one contract that you think give a great example of how a SIB should be? Will you give us a concrete example on, what was the parties, what were the outcomes, what was the intervention? Because I think we're quite new at this, me at least. So if you would like to give like one example of one SIB, that would be great. That you're really proud of, that you like very much.
6 minutes left. So I have to choose one. Let me see. Oh, can I? Shall I have 2 minutes to finish my presentation, and then I go back to one example? So that I talked about an ecosystem, and I think in the UK that is really emerging right now. There's like Oxford University is a main knowledge partner which really invests in understanding social impact bonds or social outcome bonds, or how they call it. If you really like this topic, go to their conference beginning of September. Government, so they have the outcome funds, but they also have like departments, the Center of Social Impact Bonds, where they share knowledge and you have a lot of expertise about this instrument. So I think government, like there should be people centrally dedicated to this issue. Of course, there are investors, intermediaries, but also service providers. More and more, you ask a lot from service providers, so you really need to train service providers to measure their impact, to set outcomes, to work with investors. And I think philanthropy can play a great role. They can actually have 3 roles. They can be an investor, but they can be an outcome payer, so also they can pay for results. It doesn't have to be a government. And third, they can be a catalyzing force by investing in early setup of SIPs, like to give some seed money for appealing projects which can be a social impact bond. So we try to create an ecosystem here in the Netherlands. I will not go through all of them, and I really hope you can create the same ecosystem here in Norway. So then let's see. Which like actually, so we worked with the business club on 3 social impact bonds. So with one entrepreneur, and I think it improved quite a lot. So I will tell you why I think Eindhoven is way better than Rotterdam, because it improved in 2-3 years. So first of all, I told you about that we measure whether someone is out of benefits into a job, but we just looked at the data of the municipality, but you're also out of benefits when you go to jail or you move. So we really improved measuring whether someone out of benefits in a meaningful way. That's one. Second is that we looked a lot more on the sustainability of the social effect. So now we follow participants for 3 years, and then we count the number of days someone is on benefits in the 3 years. So then when someone is on benefits and got a job and gets into benefits again, it's again the responsibility of the social entrepreneur to pick up the phone and to help him to get to the workforce again, or provide additional training. So one, better management. 2, better measurement. 2, a sustainable long-term contract. The total contract is 7 years. And 3, and actually I will be very honest with you, we are not yet there, is to get active performance management in place in a good way. So now we meet every quarter with investors, service providers, municipality, and the evaluator, and we talk about the results and look at the data. But actually you want to invest more, and you actually on a weekly basis you want to work with the social entrepreneur or the other service provider and see how you can continuously improve the intervention. So that's the challenge also for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We do have time for a few questions. Johan here.
I think I voiced this on the platform as well, but you mentioned that designing, setting up the structure for any one of these is quite resource heavy. How do you make sure that this type of initial investment is not lost, in a sense, if the service is absorbed by the local community or public service? You see what I mean? That you said that you needed a threshold of €1 million or 2 to actually, to be able to do the initial setting up cost, but how do you leverage that initial cost into a next cycle or the next investment? Do you have any tips on that?
Yes. So I think the initial costs are quite high, and therefore I think it's good as a commissioner. So that a commissioner is the one who pays for results. Often the government should think like what they want to achieve, and if the best assignment I can get is not please give me a social impact bond, but please think with me how I can commission better, and then you go through a process where you talk with beneficiaries, where you talk with colleagues and social enterprise and NGOs to set outcomes. You talk with scientists how to measure better. You look for partners in the NGO world, but also in the financial world and with companies, and then you think how you can build a partnership. But also, so if that partnership, if it doesn't work, because sometimes we do work and it fails, I think it gives great insights for a municipality how they can differently solve a social issue, also without the social impact bonds. And if it works, then I think to be transparent, to evaluate well, to have action learning in place, you can make sure that it not only has an effect on one simple deal, but it can have an effect in the whole organization, both at the government, but also for the social entrepreneur, which can improve their skills, and for the investor. So often, especially with small deals, it's not maybe the most effective way if you only look at those deals. So you really have to think how you can create, like we call it, like an oil, like the ripple effect outside of that individual project.
Who normally finances that first phase?
Who normally finances the first phase? In the Netherlands, is almost always the commissioner, so a government organization. They pay us. But what I see in the US is that philanthropy finances the first phase and then look for a commissioner. Then often a lot of money is invested and there's no deal. That's the negative aspect of it. But a positive effect is that also a commissioner has a certain agenda, and as a philanthropist, you can look more broadly to a certain issue than only from the commissioner perspective.
One more question? Yes, please. You have to talk into the mic.
So thank you for a very good presentation. I'm wondering, how long do you recommend the contract to be? At first stage, I mean, then it will be the startup's mission to prove your community that your product is working. So I was thinking that maybe it's more beneficial for the startup that the contract is as short as possible.
Yes, so yes, I like long contracts, but I will explain why. Maybe for a startup, like, you need to have some track record. So you need to be able to show or to convince investors that you're able to solve a social issue and get to the results. Otherwise, investors probably are not interested. So you need some kind of track record. And so if often the service provider is our multiple organizations which have one bid for the social impact bond, and sometimes a startup is part of that bid, but we don't work really with startups. We don't work that much with really early startups because investors want to see some track record. But so if you have the contract, you start with the interventions. Often it has different cohorts or different groups of people who go through the interventions. So if you look at the period of the contract, you have the first period is that the cohorts can still join the program. Then you have the length of the program, which is sometimes 1 year or 2 years. And if that ends, you need to evaluate. And only then the contract ends. So in my view, it needs like 5-6 years as a minimum for really good contract where you can really iterate. So it's really important that there's flexibility in the contract. For example, a lot of people who are on benefits got a job because the economy is now booming in the Netherlands. So in a contract, we didn't have the flexibility that we could work with more vulnerable groups like the refugees who came into the country, which we didn't know, which we started the impact bond. So you need flexibility on the target group, but you can also have some. What's interesting also to think about flexibility on outcomes. So if you see that these outcomes are not met, but you see another very important outcomes like can you have that discussion with your outcome pay or not? But 6 to 7 years, I think it's a good period. And then it's also as an entrepreneur, really take in mind that when the last cohort stops, you don't want to fire your employees. So actually you want a solution that you can continue your program. Otherwise all the knowledge is lost. And that doesn't have to be a new social impact bond, but you need to start the conversation very early based on your early results, how you can continue the program when not the contract stops, but your intervention stops, because there's also a period in the contract that the intervention not there, but the evaluation period. So that's for a social entrepreneur, really take in mind, think about your exit strategy, because the social impact bond will stop, and if you're successful, you want to not only continue your intervention, but you want to scale up.
So, to sum it up, and ask yourself, whilst in the middle of a contract, did we really make a difference? Don't do the SIBs for the SIB's sake, but move focus towards cooperation for impact.